Welcome to People and Profit, your essential business briefing. I'm Kate Moody. Coming up, as voters shift away from the centre, what's in store for the European Union? We'll be talking about jobs, climate, and Brexit. Could a new alliance between Fiat Chrysler and Renault shake up the increasingly global car industry? And 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Is China's devotion to overtime starting to wane? Our correspondent's been finding out. Centrist blocs lost their combined majority in the EU's parliamentary election as nationalist and Green parties saw a surge in support. Voter turnout was the highest in 2 decades, a sign of the high stakes. The European Parliament helps to shape legislation for the EU's 28 member states, and politicians are now grappling with a new balance of power. In France, the far right came out just ahead of the president's party, and the government vowed to take the public's message to heart.
For my part, I welcome these results with humility. When you finish second in an election, you can't say that you've won. Humility, but also great determination. The old divisions have disappeared, new ones have emerged. That is what we must move forward on now. Europe, the environment, growth, employment, social justice.
Well, we're joined by Alexandra Kellert from the global risk consultancy Control Risks. Thanks for being with us. Investors seem broadly pleased with the results of the EU elections. Was the nationalist surge perhaps not as steep as expected?
Well, the nationalist surge certainly gained all the headlines ahead of the elections, but actually, in fact, the results were either in line with the polls or slightly below in some countries.
How did the results impact Emmanuel Macron specifically? He has this vision for the bloc for closer integration, notably a common budget. Are the results likely to affect those goals?
Well, he was already facing an uphill task with those goals in Brussels, given that there are very diverging views amongst the member states. Obviously, you could look on paper and say he came second in the elections, but only by a very small margin. And in the broader scheme of things, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact.
So you think that he can push ahead largely as before?
I think he can push ahead sort of undamaged, really domestically, but I think there are an awful lot of challenges for getting those changes through.
In terms of the policy that the EU Parliament sets, where do you expect we'll see the most change?
Possibly more in terms of environmentalist policy. The EU has already been sort of moving in that direction in recent years, but certainly with a bigger Greens bloc, that's one area. While the far right do now have more seats than they did previously, they're still a minority in Parliament and they might be able to sort of disrupt some of the policy making, but not to any strong extent. And they're certainly not going to be able to push policy towards their preferences.
So you're expecting us to see a big new focus on perhaps carbon tax?
Yes, that's certainly something that the EU has, as I say, been keen to look at in the past and is quite complex at member state level. There are a lot of diverging views there. But I think with the growth of the Greens and with sort of these green movements across Europe, that is something we'll see more of in the next 5 years.
Well, here in France, that could be a particularly tricky subject, of course, because the idea of trying to impose carbon taxes was what set off the whole Yellow Vest movement back in November.
That's right. And I think really Macron will need to make a decision about whether he tries to appeal to that block of society where he's had very limited success so far, or I think more likely to move more towards the sort of centre-left in terms of, and Greens in terms of environmentalist policies, and really just say, this is what I want to make a stake doing, and I'm not going to be held back by those parts of the country that aren't going to be turned around on this.
Brexit is still the elephant in the European room, if you would.
Sure is.
Having voted overwhelmingly for the Brexit party, what position does the UK hold now in Strasbourg?
Well, yes, the Brexit party got the most seats by a long way, but if you actually compare the number of seats taken by anti-Brexit parties in the UK, then those actually are as many, if not more, than the Brexit party. So it's not quite as simple as that. I think the Brexit party is essentially UKIP reinvented with Nigel Farage at the helm, and I see no reason why he will change his tactics, which have always been to turn up, make angry speeches, but not really to engage in the policy. So I don't really see the Brexit party having a major push.
Separately, the UK is dealing with its own political upheaval, trying to choose a new prime minister. How will that process impact, for example, the economy and businesses as they try to tackle the months ahead?
Well, businesses are already sort of very frustrated in the UK because of the uncertainty created by Brexit. And really, this change in the Conservative leadership just adds another layer of uncertainty to that. Really, what they've got is a choice between people who will push for a no-deal Brexit, which many businesses are very worried about, and those who will really try and kind of tread the same path that Theresa May went down without any success. So we're really looking at more deadlock, which means more uncertainty for business.
The Italian Prime Minister, Matteo Salvini, has clashed with the European Commission over his spending plans in Rome. Will it help his case to have, well, for lack of a better term, more friendly faces in the European Parliament?
Well, Deputy Prime Minister Salvini has been trying to forge alliances with those sort of friendly faces, as it were, but with quite limited success. And the thing about the sort of Eurosceptic populist blocs in the European Parliament is they're not one cohesive group. So I think he will struggle to really get much traction in the European Parliament.
The Parliament also plays a role in approving trade deals for Europe. How do you expect that to play out in the coming months?
Well, the Parliament has in the past been where trade deals really get kind of scrutinised, and I think we'll certainly see that, and we may see sort of processes taking longer as we have these diverging views, and it'll be harder to build consensus.
Alexandra Kellert, thanks so much for joining us on People and Profit. Well, Fiat Chrysler and Renault have begun discussions on a possible merger. The €33 billion deal would create the world's third largest car company and accelerate the pace of change in an industry facing a myriad of challenges. Analysts say the tie-up could allow each side to better tackle changes in technology and consumer demands.
These days, the bigger, the better. It would have more ways to invest in future challenges that the industry faces.
Brian Quinn's been taking a look at where the potential mega merger fits into a rapidly changing auto industry.
Well, Kate, the proposal has the potential to seriously shake up the landscape among the world's top automakers. Volkswagen is currently the global leader with 10.8 million vehicles delivered last year, followed closely by Toyota. A merged Fiat Chrysler Renault would take the number 3 spot at around 8.7 million vehicles delivered annually, and that's not counting Renault's alliance partners, Nissan and Mitsubishi, who aren't part of the deal for now, but could be in the future. So why merge? Well, Fiat Chrysler says the firms stand to save up to €5 billion in costs per year. It brings a strong presence in the U.S. market with brands like Jeep and Ram trucks, while Renault is much bigger in Europe and important emerging markets like Russia. Renault also brings technology for fuel-efficient engines and electric cars lacking at Fiat. The deal should position the companies to better face major upheaval in the auto industry. Keeping up with new players amid the shift to electrification and the push for self-driving technology has proved very expensive for traditional car makers. With sales falling and emission standards getting stricter, cost-cutting and scaling up have been key coping strategies across the industry. But mergers are no guarantee of success. Daimler's 1998 acquisition of Chrysler fell apart amid cultural differences between the German and American firms. Volkswagen's 2009 partnership with Suzuki went to arbitration before a single vehicle was jointly made. And GM's 1989 acquisition of Sweden's Saab ended in bankruptcy amid the global financial crisis. And with Donald Trump threatening tariffs on imports of foreign cars to the U.S., the business isn't likely to get simpler anytime soon.
Brian, thanks for that update. Well, China's tech sector is one of the toughest industries in the world, and long working hours are often a point of pride. One label has come to encompass that culture. It's 996, working 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. 6 days a week. It's a grueling schedule that's been endorsed by the likes of Alibaba and Tencent, but opposition is starting to grow as employees and startups draw attention to the mental and physical consequences of the work culture. Our Beijing correspondent Charles Pellegrin takes a closer look.
Leaving the office at 6 p.m. isn't unusual for Wang Xiaolong and Du Wei. But life for this married couple wasn't always like this. A few years back, Xiaolong was a programmer in a large tech company, and the long hours caught up with him.
We would come back after dinner and work until midnight or 2 in the morning. For my coworkers who had to travel for work, there was no such thing as hours. They'd work as long as they needed to, and if necessary, we'd sleep there.
So he changed jobs. He's now an engineer, which allows him to spend more time with his wife. Others have tackled the problem by creating an online forum called the 996 ICU. People there can vent about their grueling schedules and consult a blacklist of especially inhumane employers. 996 is illegal under Chinese labor law, but regulating it has proved to be a challenge.
There are too many companies and there is not enough manpower in the government to monitor this all the time. There are spot checks, and when they receive complaints from employees, they decide when they need to go to mediation and arbitration.
Work culture in tech is changing, especially in smaller firms. This e-learning startup has opted for a different strategy, not measuring one's work in terms of hours spent at one's desk.
The result matters. If you stay here for, let's say, 80 hours or 120 hours a week, you don't get a result, it's useless. Even they probably just work for 2 or 3 hours per week. It doesn't matter.
Not counting your hours can also lead to overwork. But that's precisely what led 37 Chinese startups to be valued over $1 billion last year.
Well, that's all for now, but you can find the best of our coverage on our Facebook page, France 24 Business, or you can tweet me at Kate A. Moody. Until next time, thanks for watching.